Welcome to Learn at Work podcast, which is sponsored by iOS Press, the publisher of Work, a journal of prevention, assessment, and rehabilitation. We're delighted to host this podcast that will bring together insightful conversations and thought-provoking discussions on topics that matter most in the realm of health, rehabilitation, work, prevention, and assessment. What can you expect from our podcast? We'll have expert interviews, individuals who have published in the journal, and we'll dive into conversations with leaders who have shared their valuable experience and expertise. You'll learn about different latest work trends, technology, and best practices. I'm Karen Jacobs, the founding editor of Work, and I'm the moderator of these podcasts. Welcome to this episode of Learn at Work. Learn at Work is part of the journal Work, a journal of prevention, assessment, and rehabilitation. Well, today I am traveling to beautiful Toronto. I'm in Boston and I'm traveling there virtually. And we have two guests today on this episode, and they're co-authors of an article we recently published in Work. That's the Editor's Choice article, which means it'll be, available for anyone to read. So let's start. Let's start with our corresponding author. Ben, want to
Sure,
introduce yourself?
absolutely. Thanks very much, Karen, for having me and Shane on the podcast. Delighted to be joining you virtually from Toronto, and greetings to all of the listeners. My name is Behdino Zakia. I like to say and very proud to be an occupational therapist. I've been practicing as an occupational therapist for nearly 20 years, and I also have an academic role at the University of Toronto. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Occupational Science and Occupational Therapy, where I teach in our Masters of Occupational Science and Occupational Therapy program. Specifically, I've taught courses in our Mental Health Foundations course, in our musculoskeletal perspectives and OT practice course, and more recently, I teach in a upper year course, a second year course, looking at enabling occupation with adults. So really happy to be here and honored to have the journal recognize our work and that of Shane, who was the first author, as the editor's choice.
Oh, well, thank you. And I had no idea that you had expertise in so many really important areas in occupational therapy. And as you know, I'm an occupational therapist as well. And I'm always happy to hear more about occupational therapy. And maybe we can talk a little bit more about it in Canada too. Shane, let's hear about you.
Yeah, sure thing. So, hi everyone listening, and thanks so much to Karen for inviting us on today. So, my name's Shane Avila. I'm currently wrapping up my undergraduate degree at the University of Toronto Scarborough, specializing in psychology. And I was involved at Dr. Naruzakia's lab uh, a little over a year ago, and I did a couple projects with him, and I was especially involved and was the first author for my paper in which we looked at arthritis, especially within the context of Canadians. And to me, occupational therapy was a really interesting experience, especially as a psychology student, mainly because there was a lot of focus on overall functioning and functional capability. And I think that sort of perspective is just really interesting to look at, especially because we can look at all these sort of things in relation to biology, etc. But we really kind of get the sort of outlook at how people will effectively work out in the real world. So thanks so much again for having me on as well.
That's great. And what year are you in your
Uh,
program?
yeah, I'm in my fourth year. I'll be finishing up this semester actually. So
Oh, great. Congratulations. And what are you thinking about doing after graduation?
yeah, I was thinking of taking probably a year or two off, but I definitely do know that I want to be involved in more research, and this opportunity has really been interesting to me. And I guess sort of invigorated my sort of passion for research, especially looking at like very broad data sets, especially with like the sort of context of looking at larger populations and just research in general. I do want to go into something possibly heavily related towards cognitive psychology, but the sort of experience in occupational therapy research has, I guess, broadened my horizons to in the sense that I can, I guess, think about things a little bit more from a functional capacity and how like certain things may work out in the real world. So I think this area of research and work is really interesting.
Oh, that's great. I was going to say, think about occupational therapy in the future, and you could be able to do all this research as well with that lens. Shane, and just one more question. I like that you said you're going to take a year or two off. Do you have ideas of what you're going to do during that time?
Yeah, I was thinking of probably applying as an RA at some labs. I was thinking, well, I wanted to do something a little bit more cognitive psychology related, as I mentioned earlier. I was possibly thinking if I can get into something like an fMRI lab. Uh, there was this one lab at Toronto Rehabilitation Institute that I maybe want to like look at a little bit more since I already volunteer at another lab within that hospital as well. It was the I think it was called the Neuro Rehab Injury Lab, and I possibly wanted to look at things more and maybe get involved with that sort of work as well. And I guess I really like the sort of cognitive psychology aspect and just research in general and possibly like pursue it more. And one of my courses that I'm taking right now, it's an fMRI lab course, and so we're really learning how to get things going, sort of design research experiments related to fMRI, as well as starting to learn how to sort of pre-process data and look at data a little bit more. So
Great.
that's
That sounds
one thing that I really like looking at, which is
exciting.
the data, which can be very difficult. But I think once you sort of kind of get things together, I think is a really sort of eye-opening and refreshing experience.
That's wonderful. I like that you've really investigated some of your interests and now are looking for those experiences. That's wonderful. So, let's talk about the journal article that you published in Work. Um, Tell our listeners about that, either of you. And when I was reading it, I was thinking, it was a paper on arthritis in Canada, but then I started looking at the statistics in the United States and the statistics globally, and I was very surprised.
Yeah, maybe I can get us started, and Shane, please feel free to add to the discussion. Part of Shane's experience with my lab, the Rehabilitation Sciences through Occupational Research and Engagement, or RESTORE for short, appropriately restoring function and works well, is that we give opportunities to trainees, to learners of various educational background, undergraduate, graduate, postdoctoral fellows, clinical learners in our program as well, an opportunity to engage with taking on a project and leading that work, obviously with support and supervision from the team, including myself as Shane's supervisor on this project, to kind of really delve into these topics. So we, for this project, the conceptualization came that in Canada, just like other countries, we have national census level data collected, and we looked at some of that collected data that's available through the open repositories that we have access through in academic institutions, and we started to formulate the question of looking at work outcomes. But oftentimes when work outcomes are reported, they may be focused much more so on symptomology or symptoms and how do you control symptoms, but less so the focus is on function, and really what matters productivity and performance, and how do people do their jobs. And naturally, I'm sure you appreciate this as well, Karen, is that as occupational therapists, we're all about assessing function, treating function, and really we're really focused on function because it really matters at the end of the day. So now this project really kind of explores functioning in arthritis and looks at population level data, quite large data sets that have been collected across the country to give us a good snapshot of these types of outcomes. I'll invite Shane to provide more details of the paper as well.
Yeah, I guess in relation to these sort of large snapshots of the data in relation to Canadians with arthritis, uh, from like the sort of results perspective, there's a couple of things to really note about it. The first was that, as you kind of expect, individuals with arthritis were more likely to miss work, have difficulties in their sort of daily functioning, and report injury a lot more compared to individuals without arthritis, as well as women with arthritis were also more likely to face difficulties in daily functioning and report joblessness, as well as men being more likely to report work absences, but less likely to report injury compared to both women and non-arthritis men. And those results are fairly interesting, especially looking at the gender differences first. That while women were also more likely to face difficulties in daily functioning and report joblessness, there was sort of a general shift with men when it comes down to being less likely to report injury compared to both women and arthritis men. However, if you look at these sort of reports and their functioning, they are still having difficulties with their overall functioning. Men are having a lot more difficulty in their activities of daily living. Sorry, but at the same time, it's a little weird that they were less likely to report injuries compared to women, and so there's a couple of things that you could possibly, uh, I guess, think about it from an overall perspective. The first being the overall culture for these sort of normative gender roles when it comes down to men, specifically the sort of culture when it comes down to like being really tough and like I think the phrase is sort of like soft hands and like that sort of notion of like gender roles, especially when it comes down to men, can be very difficult to deal with, especially because arthritis is something that is a degenerative disease, meaning that it is only going to get worse in time. And so, if individuals aren't really like, I guess, pointing things out a lot more compared to others, then that can really lead to a lot more detrimental outcomes, especially because arthritis is something that can also lead to a lot more having to deal with a lot more challenges with medical care as well, especially in the context of time off work because of having to deal with their disease. That can contribute to a lot less uh, or a lot more negative outcomes to the individual, especially because if they're spending a lot less time at work because of arthritis, then that sort of thing can lead to their overall functioning at work to drop a lot more. And at the same time, it sort of brings a sort of question when it comes down to arthritis itself, mainly because individuals have to face this sort of dilemma where um, individuals have to think about, do I have to spend a little bit more time focusing on arthritis itself and trying to manage it by spending time off work and having to seek medical care? Or will I kind of take the risk and kind of pursue through it a little bit more and try to power through it? And so that kind of brings a sort of cycle towards this arthritis because if there's tough it or trying to power through it, they're more likely to have these sort of injuries in relation to arthritis, meaning that they're eventually going to have to spend a little bit more time off work, which is effectively going to affect their work. And possibly lead to a little bit more problems with financial capabilities as well. And drawing back to women as well, they were also a lot more likely to face difficulties in daily functioning and report joblessness. And one thing you can kind of, I guess, point about this is that there's there may be a little bit more sort of, I guess, a little bit more nuance in relation to these gender norms as well for women, because it could be uh, as or sorry, from a more normative gender standpoint, women are also a lot more likely to be involved in the house and overall taking care of things in general. For example, having to go grocery shopping. And so perhaps the sort of difficulties in daily functioning could be a little bit more in relation to the loss in standards. And while I think there may be a little bit more investigation needed to the topic, uh, perhaps women sort of reporting these difficulties in daily functioning is just these losses in standards. They're just noticing things kind of going a lot more downhill in comparison to men because they're in the position that they are going to notice these functions going down a lot more. And I guess sort of wrapping these things together, one of the best ways to kind of handle this topic at hand is these sort of accommodations at work, which can be a little bit more tricky to handle, especially because the sort of navigation of accommodations is really sort of complex because while companies can push for a lot of these inclusive policies for individuals to try to support their needs at the same time, a lot of times individuals may not want to engage with them. And there's this really interesting literature about it in relation to learned helplessness and as well as these sort of accommodations negatively affecting their social relationships within the workplace. And I think that sort of thing needs a lot more attention as well because it kind of brings along the question that should we kind of tailor these accommodations a little bit more to an individual level, especially because the relation is very complex, or should we sort of kind of really develop these sort of things for a very generalized audience? And I think the sort of balance between the two in order to really encourage individuals to get accommodations as well as kind of make things a lot more cost effective in order to not deter companies away from giving individuals these accommodations is really sort of crucial for this sort of thing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. That was so interesting, and I'm sure our listeners will find what you shared very insightful. We're getting close to the end of this episode, and I always love asking our guests to share things that they do that has nothing to do with work. You know, in OT lingo, what is your meaningful occupations that you do? And that's for both of you.
Please, Shane, go ahead and I'll go after you.
Yeah, sure thing. I guess these sort of meaningful sort of things that I do in my own work is, I guess, this isn't really like a sort of like very, I guess, overall impactful answer in relation to the work itself, but I think very impactful in how I try to view things and try to kind of position myself in relation to my own work in the future. And that's mainly trying to like look at things a little bit more holistically, especially in relation to data, because data, while yes, it gives us definitive answers if we do it correctly about X, Y, or Z, it's something that should really be approached with a lot more sort of nuance in relation to the topics and kind of also considering things that we may have not possibly considered in the future. And I think sort of trying to position myself in the way that I think of possible alternative solutions in relation to anything that I sort of do is kind of crucial in my own self improvement, and as well as trying to really bring about meaningful work for others to also look at, but also use as improvements for whatever they're trying to look at in general.
Great,
Sure,
thank you.
thanks. Yeah, and for me, I think I'll keep it a little bit. I'm a practical person, so I can give you some practical ways that I kind of enjoy my play or leisure occupations, spend time with family, enjoy reading a book. I'm also quite active. I spend time exercising, and that's really is an outlet that I take just to make sure that I can keep my head above water, especially when things get busy naturally with paid occupations. But overall, I just try to keep a balance the best I can. I work at a academic institution and in a department that values a biopsychosocial approach, a client-centered approach, where we put the individual at the center of all the discussions. So I try to practice what I preach. Same thing when I prepare my my paid occupations. I like to focus on making sure that I mirror what I want others to emulate too. So I want to make sure that I'm a representation of that.
I love that. And you both have just similar approaches to life, it sounds like. And it sounds like what you're doing in work, play, leisure, all aspects of your life are very meaningful. I want to thank you for taking the time to be on Learn at Work, for submitting your work to the journal, and I look forward to you submitting more articles. And Shane, I'll look forward to learning more about what you do with your career as well. And thank you both for being here today.
Thank you so much,
Yeah,
Karen, for
thank you so
having us.
much.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to be on the podcast and for recognizing the work that we're doing. We really appreciate having this opportunity to talk more about it with you and the readership of the journal.
Oh, thank you. And I'm hoping if people want to learn more and maybe they haven't accessed the article yet, is there, a website or an email that you could share with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I alluded to it a little bit earlier, but if anybody's interested in learning more about our work, interested in collaborating with us, we're open and welcoming to collaborations all over the world. You can check out our website, the Restore Lab website, www.restore.rehab. You can, of course, also check us out on all the social media platforms, on X, on LinkedIn, as well as Facebook and Instagram. If you just put in Restore Lab as two words, that will get you access to our team, and you can to read about Shane's profile there and mine as well, and many of the other team members that we have the privilege of working with that aren't here with us today.
Thank you so much. And again, I appreciate you submitting your work to the journal. And everyone, thank you for listening. We hope you'll be a subscriber of the Learn at Work podcast. Have a wonderful day, everyone.